Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Now we're looking at the power of art as a vehicle for social change. And that is the topic of discussion that we are delving into with Executive Director of For Common Good and founder of East Yard, Kevon Gareth Foderingham. Welcome, Kevon. How are you doing?
I am fantastic, DK. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Good to have you join us. Give us an idea of what For Common Good is, please.
Okay, so definitely I'm happy to be here, DK. Thank you. For Common Good is my NGO. So we were registered in 2016 as Caribbean Fashion and Arts Future Festival, which was the first ever English-speaking Caribbean fashion film festival. And I chose the route of doing it as an NGO because of my background in NGOs, but also because I knew that in the future, I would have wanted to do some arts for social change based programming. And so basically about 2 years ago, I did a big rebrand, and all of the Caribbean Fashion and Arts Future Festival stuff is now called For Common Good. And that stemmed out of an experience I had in 2019. Being chosen by the US Embassy here to take part in the International Visitor Leadership Program, IVLP, which is the US State Department's most prestigious exchange. And it was myself and 17 other arts for social change leaders from around the world. We got to spend 21 days in the States, in 4 different states, visiting our counterparts who were all using the arts to address social issues. And I got back home and I was like, okay, this is going to be my main focus on how can I amplify and use the arts to promote social change.
What kind of social change are you focusing on, though? Is it something that is extremely broad-based, or are you trying to whittle down and say, distilling your efforts to say we can get most impact if we look at these specific things?
Okay, well, we started doing youth programs back in 2018, focusing on using visual arts, but at the same time, merging that with gender-based violence prevention training for youth. So we started with gender and art, and then we moved into more focusing on mental health stuff. And as part of my coaching practice, where I work with other creatives and help them find their own branding and stuff like that, I am sort of holding it down into being more personal issues now, because I really think the personal is the global. So it all starts with you. So I am really trying to use arts now to do things like working with stress and looking at like arts and therapy and arts and how you can find your own voice and that kind of thing. So I'm sort of whittling it down to how we as individuals need to take care of ourselves to better show up in the world.
You talk about having a background in NGOs, but these sorts of things don't run themselves, or should I say they don't fund themselves. So what kind of resources do you lean on, do you leverage to get this sort of work out?
Okay, since we very first started, my first youth program was funded by the Indrani's Light Foundation out of Texas. And then we received funding from the J.B. Fernandez Memorial Trust 1. They have funded us for the past 3 years or so. And I received funding from the US Embassy as well. So a lot of our work is driven by funding, and we also raise funds. So ECR itself, the space we're in here, that is a social enterprise. So people rent ECR for their various creative events. We host art exhibitions, we have classes and stuff here. So everything goes back into this work that we're trying to do.
And one of the things I'm looking at is the way that you use different platforms. So the same message, but you're using different platforms. And one of the things I also want you to expand on a little bit is stories about us. What is it? Why decide to go that route as well?
Well, I think it's really important to tell our own stories. And that's why you see behind me, there's the cover for my book, which comes out on, it's out already on Amazon actually. So, and it launches officially here on Sunday. I really think that us as Trinidadians, us as Caribbean people, we have such an interesting story. And again, coming from the trip to the States, people were so interested in what we had to offer. And sometimes we forget how amazing we are. We need other people to tell us. Because, I mean, the truth of the matter is we don't really congratulate each other here. We don't celebrate each other. We don't. Not in that same way that people outside see that this is something so magnificent that we have to offer. So again, all the work I'm trying to do now is really on helping us to be able to tell our own stories, helping us to see how amazing and magnificent we are, and helping us to see that we have a place in the world, basically.
And speaking of a place in the world, how does East Yard kind of figure into us telling our stories?
East Yard was a dream. Basically, when I lived in the UK, I came back home in 2005 after studying and living in the UK. And I quickly got into the creative circle locally. So everybody was in Alice Yard at the time in Port of Spain and stuff like that. And going to all the exhibitions, meeting all these fantastic creative people. And I found that a lot of us didn't live in Port of Spain, but we had to go to Port of Spain to experience the art in that way. So I always tell the story that you go to these events and you see the same 50 people, and then I became one of those same 50 people. So I decided, no, I had to found a space in the East, because I'm an Arima boy, went to school in Arima, born and bred, and so many creatives live past the lighthouse. So I really thought that there needed to be a space here for that. And we are on year 5 right now. So, I mean, five years of any business is really a milestone. So I'm happy that we have been able to do that. And we have been offering space and place for so many people to sort of make their own dreams happen right here at East Yard.
And that is something that we actually want to continue speaking about when we return from this break. We're speaking with Kevon Foderingham. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. This is In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. We are joined by Kevon Gareth Foderingham, and we are speaking about art for creating social change. And we just started speaking about East Yard. One of the things I want to ask, apart from just what are some of those things that you feature, because we think we're seeing art, we're seeing clothes, we're seeing different things behind you, but those 50 people that you spoke about, Kevon, how do they treat with this space in the East? Is it that, well, this is not Normandy, this is not Alice Yard, So what kind of primacy or place is East Yard placed in?
I think East Yard sits pretty well in the landscape of the local arts industry. And from the get-go, we have been embraced by everyone. So literally the year we opened, Anime Carib during their festival, had their first Arima leg, and it happened right here. Green Screen had an event during our festival just about 2 weeks ago. Bocas Lit Fest for their poetry slams. We are the East space. So basically anything that happens in Port of Spain where they need to find somewhere in the East, East Yard has become that place. And we have grown from just offering a place, now we offer services. So again, because of my background in the NGO world and because of my creative side as well, we have been offering creative services to a bunch of NGOs. So we ran a campaign for Habitat for Humanity earlier this year, which was their shelter campaign, focusing on empowering women through land ownership. And we have signed on with 2 other NGOs to run creative programs for them right now as well. But I won't call them as yet because we haven't launched it as yet. But so it's not just about providing a space, it's providing these creative services as well.
And do you find yourself having to tussle? People talk about left brain, right brain, in terms of being a creative, being an artist, being someone who enjoys these things, but also being an art administrator?
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, most of my 20 years of working, because I've been working since I was about 19, most of it has been in NGOs. So literally But it has always been from like a marketing hat. So I've always been the marketing person at these different NGOs. But having worked with them, and some of them have like global scope, I learned so much about management, so much about funding. So that's why I'm able to access funding, about finance, about writing a proposal. So now I have the opportunity to infuse that into the creative side of me as well, but also to show creatives that there is a way to actually do creative business and for it to be sustainable. But you have to have a mixture of skills. It can't just be about the creative part of it.
I love the way that you're giving me these segues in terms of saying all these things that you learned while you were doing what it is you do over this 20 years. And that takes us straight to things I learned in my 30s.
Yeah.
What is it about?
And all the things I learned in my 30s, Dike. Kidding.
Easy answer, right?
I turned 40 in November, coming here. And this has been something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. It was actually supposed to be things I learned in my 20s, but by the time I hit 30, I didn't think I learned anything. So I was like, okay, so how about things I learned in my 30s? And it's really about my journey into creative enterprise. And but it's telling, not just giving steps or giving tips, it's telling my story. So one of the things I do is I am a personal branding coach, as I would have mentioned, and my work is solely with other creatives. So they come to my workshops and I walk them through 8 different steps. And at the end, they leave with a personal brand blueprint, which is actually a business plan. It could be a marketing plan, whatever it is they choose to do with it. So these 8 steps have been put into the book, but I tell my personal story of the last 10 years of how I came up with all these different tips. And there's some of my art in there, there's some poetry. So it's not just a workshop book. So there is some entertainment in there too. And so far, a few people have read it. So I gave a few people to read it and they are liking it so far. But it's just something I wanted to share. So even if you can't come to one of my workshops, you can buy a book and literally there's space for you to write your little notes in and stuff there. So it's really more than just a novel then.
One of the things that you hear people speaking about more and more, Kevon, is the fact that, yes, they're doing something. Yes, some people say they're good at it, but in the quiet spaces of their mind, they're saying, am I really as good as people say I am? Am I suffering from imposter syndrome? Did you go through any of that writing this book? I mean, you said, yes, I want to write a book, and you did it in your 20s, or you wanted to do it in your 20s. You did it coming out of your 30s. What are some of the things that are going through the spaces of your mind when you're writing this book?
Imposter syndrome is real, but I've always been a writer in like different spheres. So whether it's like proposal writing, I have written stuff for some of the local newspapers and stuff. So I have been writing, but my imposter syndrome came from starting to do visual art. So I have basically set up for my exhibition. All of that happens on Sundays. So all of the work behind me is mine, from the fashion to the art to everything is mine. But my focus has been more on curating spaces and helping other artists to showcase their work. So as they say, those who can't do teach. And that is what I have been doing for the past 10 years. I sort of put aside most of my own creative work to support the work of others. So by me, all of this started by me taking some paint and starting to doodle, and something was happening and I was like, wow, so maybe it's time for me to share not just my art, but for this book to happen, for everything to happen. So I feel like now is my time to do it. Very, very nervous. I got over the imposter syndrome. And I think it's good work. And as long as I think it's good work, I think then it's okay to put out there, because I wouldn't put something out there that I wasn't comfortable with.
The importance of that intrinsic validation, as opposed to saying, okay, well, we're waiting for it from outside. And just what I also hear from you is putting in reps. So a little bit, and I know Peter Telfer used to say, tiny do plenty. So it's a little bit over a consistent period of time. But moving from this towards social change, do you see this as something that can also help social change for people who are trying and they're casting about and they're looking for mentors and they're looking for guideposts and compasses to say, okay, well, these are some of the things that I have in my mind. These are some of the passion projects, but in terms of formalizing them, because like you spoke to, many times you'd have someone saying, okay, well, this is my art, and I don't think I should have to think about the money because that may cheap my art, but hungry belly is a thing.
You have to. You have to, especially coming from setup. I mean, locally, we don't have such of a big market for these creative products as outside. So it means that you have to put in more work here to get your stuff out there to build an audience. But also, you don't have the resources of having a manager who is going to be taking care of your things until you reach to that stage where you'll eventually have that. I don't have a manager. I have always been the manager. So, but it's also, so that's why this book is really important for me, because most of the proceeds coming out of this book is not to make me money. This is really for me to be able to offer my workshop to a wider audience. So everybody who buys the book eventually, even if they can't afford a workshop, I'm going to drop some free workshops to people who have the book. So just bring your book and come. And I will take those 2 days with you because it takes 2 days to do the workshop. And I've been doing this workshop for so many years under different names, but now it's the I Am Experiment, which is settled. And I have seen the growth of some people who have come out of the workshop. So it is real. And some of the funding as well from my fashion and the art, I am linking with some of my colleagues from abroad in those countries where they have lesser resources, where the dollar is not as strong as ours. And we are going to be setting up funds to help some of these up and coming youth who need funding for their own things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And in the final minute that we have, how do people contact you, and what are some of the things that you may just want to put out there?
www.kevonfoderingham.com. You can go there and you can get to all of my other sites, so ECR for Common Good, etc. So you can just visit mine for commongood.com. And what I want to put out there, I'm really pushing my I Am Experiment, this personal brand visioning workshop for creatives. Our next stop is St. Vincent. So we're doing the I Am conference in St. Vincent on August 5th to 7th. And then we do an I Am pop-up in Washington, D.C. in October as well. And it's all about spreading this personal branding mission, but also about connecting with other creatives and seeing what we can do together. As one of my good friends always says, collaboration is the new currency. So, yeah.
And we want to thank you so much for sharing the vulnerability in your process, Kevon, sharing the information, as well as helping to crack some of those parameters that we may have so that we can look a little further outside to some of those possibilities that are just waiting on us to become a little bigger to be able to accept them.
Correct.
And on behalf of the entire team at TTT, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.